Today, we're going to talk about a fortress that refused to surrender during the American Revolution. It existed to protect a new nation's dreams of independence. And it's legendary. It's an epic tale of determination, defiance, and when you get right down to it, a story of America. Continuing this local New York history series, I'm talking about Fort Stanwix, a bastion that withstood a 3-week siege by, the greatest military force the world had ever known. It's an important local story, and one that deserves to be told. If not for it, I'm not sure that America would have even got going in the first place. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's first rewind back to when it was first built in the 1700s, protecting an important link between the Atlantic Ocean and the Great Lakes, the Deo Wainsta. It's where modern-day Rome, New York is. And the defense was constructed under the command of British Brigadier General John Stanwix. You can think of it as a fierce gatekeeper, protecting against French threats. However, the fort's fate was soon intertwined with the fiery winds of revolution when America's war for independence began and the fort became a rebel defense. The rebels renovated it and renamed it after Continental Major General Philip Schuyler, but the British name of Stanwix never really went away. Its layout was a starburst pattern with thick walls, cannons, and concealed firing positions, with a deep ditch and 6-foot-high spiked wall surrounding it for good measure. It was a military marvel, and the British would have been smart to be more cautious, but they were busy strategizing. You see, in 1777, their plan was to crush this pesky American rebellion by severing off New England via the colony of New York. And spoiler alert, it doesn't work out. This strategy was put into motion with the main force led by General John Burgoyne coming down from Lake Champlain, and the other prong of the attack led by General Barry St. Leger from the west, heading straight towards Fort Stanwix. His force consisted of British regulars, colonists still loyal to the British Crown, aka Loyalists, Hessian mercenaries, and native warriors from various tribes. They stopped over at Fort Oswego and recruited 800 Haudenosaunee warriors, mainly Mohawk and Seneca under the infamous chief Joseph Brant, who himself was very loyal to the British. And this right here highlights how the Iroquois, pardon my French, how the Haudenosaunee were divided during this time because not all of them allied with the British. The Oneida Nation chose to stand with the rebellious colonists, and it makes them America's first ally. The British were off to a great start with their 1777 strategy because Burgoyne relatively easily captured Fort Ticonderoga, and this was absolutely devastating to American morale during this time. John Adams expressed how frustrated he was that the colonies could not seemingly hold a post, and many colonists imagined that Fort Stanwix was going to fall just as easily. And at this point, the 3rd New York Regiment were occupying the fort, led by Colonel Peter Gansevoort. He was only 26 years old, but he was a great leader and exactly who you would want during a time like this. There were a series of deadly attacks around the fort, and even one case where little girls were picking berries and got killed. With that alone, you can imagine the amount of tension that was in the air as Leger's force was fast approaching. In an effort to slow them down, Continental soldiers from the fort cut down trees along Wood Creek, where the British would soon be heading. Before they did, however, thankfully the fort was resupplied by the 9th Massachusetts Regiment. So the defenders were freshly stocked and ready to rock. When the British did arrive, they demanded an immediate surrender of the fort. The American response? Hoisting up a Continental flag and firing a huge cannon towards the British camp. No one knows for sure what flag was held up. It may have been an early version of the New York flag or the Grand Union flag. Personally, I like the story of soldiers sewing the stars and stripes together from rags, making it the first time Old Glory was flown in battle. The important thing is that it represented the new United States, and St. Leger was very offended, and so the siege officially began. A siege being a military maneuver where the British completely surround the fort in order to break it over time. And inside the fort itself, things were getting crowded. You had hundreds of Continental soldiers, along with local militia, Oneida allies, and families as well. They were enduring relentless harassment and attacks, from random potshots to sniper fire. It didn't take long for word to get out about the siege, though, thanks to a brave woman known as Two Kettles Together, who snuck through British lines and headed over to Fort Dayton, alerting Brigadier General Nicholas Herkimer, who in turn grabs a ragtag force to come out and help at the fort. They never made it, though, because on the way they were ambushed by Brant's Loyalist native forces on August 6th, which resulted in one of the bloodiest fights of the entire war, the Battle of Oriskany. While it was happening, Gansevoort's second-in-command, Lieutenant Colonel Marinus Willett, attacked enemy camps while they were vulnerable, and it was very successful. But the siege itself was only just warming up. The next few weeks were going to be very rough inside the fort. The British were positioned in all directions, and the defenders stood like a tightly knit family. They couldn't even sleep, though, because there was so much artillery being fired at them. But their spirit remained unbroken, and they were not going to surrender. Soon Marinus Willett went on another daring mission, this time to go through enemy lines and seek help. He was unaware that Patriot officer Benedict Arnold was already on the way with a relief force of his own. It was needed, too, because after a few weeks of sieging, the British were starting to trench their way towards the fort. And this was not good. The defenders were in a very bad situation. Their supplies were running low, and the British were getting closer. Benedict Arnold ended up pulling off a slick trick in classic Continental fashion by sending out messengers to the British, exaggerating his troop size. And the British bought it, prompting them to lift the siege. So on August 22nd, it was finally over. The colonists stopped Ledger and his force in their tracks by holding on tight. It's important to put yourself in their shoes and realize just how significant this was to the young nation. The fort itself was like a beacon of hope for America when the colonies needed it most. I can't even imagine the sense of joy the colonists must have felt. They did it. Even John Adams was like, "Awesome, I guess we can hold a post." And as far as I'm concerned, this right here is the real turning point of the American Revolution. It got people to believe in this idea of America. We can do this. So let's all try to remember this fort that never surrendered and appreciate all the sacrifices made right here in central New York. It's kept alive, too, because the fort itself has been reconstructed, and visitors are free to go and visit it in all its recreated glory. The city of Rome is deeply intertwined with the story of the fort. A lot of people think the mural over on Erie Boulevard is of Paul Revere, but it's not. It's Peter Gansevoort, and we should never forget his tale. It stands as a testament to the spirit of America, and it deserves to be remembered for generations to come. Have a good one. Although the siege was over, General John Burgoyne and the main British force was still coming down towards Albany, and it would culminate at Saratoga. I'm going to cover that in a later video, but just remember that ultimately you don't get victory at Saratoga without Fort Stanwix. See you next time.